Bricks and Minifigs is your one-stop shop for all things LEGO. Hit the link below to find a store near you.
My name is Andrew Becraft. I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of the Brothers Brick. And although this isn't a Brothers Brick display this year, three of us got together to help tell the story and get the word out about the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the war crimes and atrocities that are happening there. Just to show our support for our friends who are over there. I've been working with Ukrainians in my real life for about 15 years, and have friends who are in places like Kharkiv and Odessa, and chatting with friends who are in a bomb shelter because they're running away from rocket attacks. So something that's very personal for me. But we wanted to, Sean and Patrick and I and Josh last year, Josh Nielsen last year, who spoke on Beyond the Brick about this last year. We wanted to do this again to kind of keep awareness, highlight some of the specific individuals that we've had the honor to have interaction with over the last year. So that kind of says why we're doing this and the message that we're trying to get out. But yeah, let me walk you through the display. On this side of the display, we have colorful, recently liberated or unoccupied Ukrainian territory, with people celebrating the liberation of Kherson specifically. Kherson is famous for its watermelons, and so you have local troops who've been pushing toward the liberation, being welcomed by the old people who've been in hiding, giving them watermelons. There's a watermelon man. We couldn't not do that. But in addition to kind of the liberation of Kherson as a theme, that happened last October. But more recently, of course, there's been a counteroffensive this spring that's really leveraged a lot of NATO equipment and so on, and highlighting the support that Western governments like the U.S. and the U.K. and so on have been providing to Ukraine. So there's a lot more Western military equipment that we're showcasing here than was the case last year, which was mostly old Soviet equipment. So. From a LEGO standpoint, we've got a lot of Brickmania kits. That's a Ghost of Kiev kit. And, Brickmania has, I think they're up to, $350,000 or something like that that's been donated to causes in Ukraine. So a lot of the Ukrainian-themed kits that you see here from the little infantry mobility vehicles to the Ghost of Kiev, and these helicopters. Those are all Ukraine benefit kits that have contributed to that $350,000 over the last 18 months. So yeah, if we kind of move forward through the display, we have this town here that's been recently liberated or is unoccupied. Colorful, vibrant communities, people celebrating in the streets. But then things sort of start transitioning into an active battle, where we have HIMARS, U.S. supplied HIMARS over there firing rockets. There's a U.S. supplied APC with wounded being evacuated. The woman with red hair there, that's a real person. Her name is Katerina, and she and I were chatting last night. I sent her a little picture of herself evacuating wounded in Lego form, and so there's a lot of real individuals represented in various little scenes and stories, like the commanders of the steel plant from last year over there, with an Orthodox priest blessing the troops. Various little scenes like that throughout. Last year we had an iconic tractor towing a Russian tank. This year it's a little bit more of a complicated story with, so much of Ukrainian arable land is landmined by Russia at this point that people go in front of tractors to demine fields as they go. Ukraine's one of the biggest providers of food for the developing world in particular, one of the biggest producers of barley, one of the biggest producers of corn, the single biggest producer of sunflowers in the whole world. Sunflowers that we get here in the U.S., many of those, have been shipped over from Ukraine. But with so much arable land being mined, we wanted to highlight kind of the risks that even just average citizens like farmers are taking. But the tanks there are Brickmania kits, the benefit kits featuring the Leopard 2, the German Leopard 2 tank, provided by various European countries. We've got brick stuffs with 50 caliber lighting up in the background behind you there. But a lot of this really came together over the last several weeks. We weren't necessarily sure we were going to do this. We weren't necessarily sure we were going to do this again this year, but we decided we still feel really passionate about this, and we pulled together quite a bit of the landscaping in the last 4 to 6 weeks. Like I used lug bulk brick to pull all of the fields and the trenches together over the course of about 3 or 4 afternoons. And then Sean came over and we banged for an evening, and we banged out a whole bunch of trees. But obviously we've been accumulating the Brickmania kits and building our own over the last 18 months. But the landscaping, particularly the central landscaping here with the river and the trees and the fields, that was basically lug bulk brick over the course of 3 or 4 afternoons. But I think from a Lego standpoint, what's great about some of the kinds of things that you can do with a display like this is you remove the when Ukraine inevitably wins, and we want to reuse this kind of landscaping. It'll work for a regular civilian farm for anywhere in the world. Could be medieval, could be modern. Just change the details. So that kind of modularity of the 32 by 32 base plates and being able to reuse that is one of the things that we enjoy about putting together a display like this. So yeah, if we move along to kind of the trench line over here, we have Russian troops defending a trench line. Again, from a Lego standpoint, there's some interesting stuff in there with the new Citizen Brick razor wire, some really great trees that Patrick Carr built. I particularly like his conifer trees, which really blends the landscape well together, kind of raises the visual height of it a little bit, and works well behind the deciduous trees too. But yeah, if we kind of look at what's going on in some of the trenches, Russian trenches in particular are notorious for being kind of messy and nasty. And so we've got some little Easter eggs in there for memes and references and so on. But I think one of the interesting things, if we pull back and look at the tanks on this section over here, we've got a tank that's lost its turret, and the turret has flown up into the air and landed gun down. That's something that absolutely happens in real life. Unfortunately, the Soviets designed their tanks with the ammunition canisters, the ammunition stored under the seats of the soldiers in the turrets. So if a Western tank gets hit, the ammunition blows out and the crew is safe because people are important. But with the Russian designed tanks, the Soviet designed tanks, the crew sits on top of the ammunition, and if it gets hit, the turret blows up. People call it a turret toss. Turrets blow up and they fly, some cases, literally hundreds of feet in the air. And we've seen photos of ones landing nose down like that. So we wanted to kind of represent that. But we've got a crew, a Ukrainian forward crew here, with a heavy machine gun and hunkering down behind the hull of a burnt out Russian tank. But the guy there in front, he's got an NLAW, anti-tank guided missile that that is firing toward the Russians on the right side of the display over here. So yeah, if we move along to the section over here, this area kind of represents the desolation of Putin, sort of like the desolation of Smog. Russian-occupied territories, they bomb them out when they come in. You know, if we think about a city of 480,000 in Mariupol last year, that was essentially, it doesn't exist as a city anymore. With mass graves in the ground that you can see from satellite footage. That felt a little bit too heavy, but we did want to represent kind of the impact that Russian occupation has on Ukrainian civilians and Ukrainian civilian infrastructure and so on. So we've got, the Wagner mercenary group sending in a wave of troops over here, but, with old Soviet armor coming in. Couldn't help but have some literal dumpster fires as well. So there's a few dumpster fires symbolically included in there. We're thinking of lighting some of those up next year as well with flickering lights to make that a little bit more interesting too. But, again, from a Lego-specific display standpoint too, a lot of this is reused from displays past, and that's one of the great things about you build it with Lego, you build it on 48 by 48 or 32 by 32 base plates, and you're able to reuse that. So there's pieces of this that have been part of World War II displays in the past, and parts of it have been buildings in Normandy, parts of it have been buildings in Stalingrad. But then ripping off some of the details and putting more, appropriate modern details on to represent that change. So yeah, if we kind of continue on, we're looking at a lot of the Russian armor was built by Patrick, who himself is a former M1 Abrams tank commander. So he has a personal stake in some of the kinds of equipment that you see on the American side. And last year, Josh spoke. Josh is a vet himself. He's not here right now because he's doing special things with special people and is not able to join us because he's doing real world things involving directly contributing to what's happening over there. So yeah. Ultimately, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't think we've touched too much on some of the aircraft in the back of the layout. So what is some of that that's represented there?
Yeah, so in back there we have a K-52 Alligator that with counter-rotating, I'll go over there and show you. This is a Brickmania kit, and it has counter-rotating. It's on a 2x2 stud, so I don't want to spin it too hard, but the mechanism here is pretty fantastic, built into the hull there. But yeah, this is a Russian K-52 Alligator helicopter, and one of the craziest, weirdest gunships in the world, the Hind. If you saw Maverick, the Top Gun movie last summer, that's the ship that the gunship that swings around and points the rotor cannon at Tom Cruise. So that's that. But there's a Ukrainian version on the other side in very different colors, obviously. But it's the same Soviet era gunship, and you can sort of see the influence that something like this had on Star Wars. This is a 40-year-old Soviet gunship. But when George Lucas and his team were designing the first, or the Attack of the Clones, 20-ish years ago, that sort of double bubble pit cockpit with the doors on the side, you can see the influence of the Hind on things like the Republic gunship. But yeah, so you've got the K-52 Alligator, you've got a couple of Hinds, you've got an Mi-24 HIP. Utility ship, but the reason it's pitched up like that, Ukraine actually uses those for over-the-horizon guided rocket missile launches. So they'll pop up out of the trees, launch at that height, behind a house or something. They'll pop up out of the trees, launch rockets, fire flares, and then veer off, and then book it down a highway. Masking their signature with and speed with traveling down a highway. So that sort of height, even though it's just on a stand that came with the kit, it's not actually unrealistic that you'd have a helicopter flying at that height, firing rockets over toward the enemy positions. And then behind the sign there, we've got a Turkish Bayraktar drone. Those are provided by Turkey in support of Ukraine, and have been very instrumental in taking out amphibious troops and vehicles and so on. But yeah, and of course, on top of the building over there, we've got the Ghost of Kyiv, like we were talking about a little bit earlier. And all over the place, you see smaller drones. It's been a highly technological war involving significant numbers of commercial and military drones. So not just those big, heavy Bayraktars, but the little tiny drones for artillery correction and spotting and so on. So yeah, that's kind of end-to-end the display, and the story we're kind of telling is the contrast between a vibrant community of people who have been invaded by an outside force. We're not saying that everyone on the Russian side is evil. Many of them are ethnic minorities from other parts of Russia. Putin wins when he's able to ethnically cleanse Russia itself. So unfortunately, there's a lot of nastiness that Putin is doing to his own people too. But every individual has an opportunity to surrender instead. So we're kind of highlighting that contrast of cultures as well.
It's always interesting as well with a layout like this. Any LEGO layout that tackles kind of a military conflict, always you're going to have some controversy, I'm sure, with that, but especially with something like this that's an ongoing conflict. So what has the public reaction been here at BrickCon to this layout, especially maybe compared to, I know, like you said earlier, you did a display last year as well. So has there been differences this year versus last year? What has that been like?
I think people, last October, the war was 6 months old. Not all Americans are attuned to global news necessarily. We definitely got some interesting reactions. There was only one individual who was kind of coming in and parroting Russian propaganda, but by and large, I would say almost universally the reaction has been positive, and this isn't just something that we feel passionate about because we know people in Ukraine. We've had interactions with people on the front line. I've had the opportunity to meet the wife of the commander of the steel plant garrison from last year, Katerina Prokopenko, whose husband Dennis was recently released from captivity as a POW. So it's been an honor kind of meeting those individuals. But our sort of purpose in doing this at BrickCon too is seeing parents come through and explain, using it as a teaching opportunity to explain what's happening out there in the world, hearing parents describe these people have their suitcases and their pets with them because they're running away. That's called being a refugee. And describing what a refugee is to 6 and 7-year-old kids, and using it as an opportunity to describe what's happening out there in the real world via something that's not nearly as threatening as graphic images in news and so on. So it's sterilized, it's sanitized, but that's also because it's an opportunity for parents to talk to their kids about something complicated.
And I know you mentioned earlier about, I think you were referencing kind of mass graves and some of those elements that you felt maybe go a little bit too far for a layout like this. How do you kind of decide as you're putting together this type of layout is what you think is going to be appropriate for just kind of the general public and to represent in LEGO?
That's a tough question, and it's something that we thought about. I actually had a graveyard with rows of Ukrainian flags early on during the setup process, and sort of seeing it in context, it felt almost disrespectful, right? So we're highlighting the heroism of Ukrainians defending their country with our support from the U.S. and other countries, defending their citizens, their fellow citizens, and recapturing their territorial integrity of the country. So we're highlighting the positive aspect of what Ukraine is doing with their country. We're also highlighting the desolation and the impact that Russia is having on Ukrainian territory and Ukrainian people. But it does make it hard. We don't want to necessarily show an active war crime happening, a specific atrocity that would feel inappropriate and borderline exploitative. And our goal is to get the word out about the conflict and let people choose what they share with their children in particular. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for that insight and for taking us through the whole layout here. I also want to give a shout out once again. I know you mentioned Brickmania. They do such incredible work, and so many of these kits here that they've worked on and the amount of money that they've donated is just fantastic. So we always love to see what they do. If people haven't checked out their Ukraine kits or just really any of the Brickmania kits, it's always incredible stuff out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've been a huge supporter of Ukraine, and we're talking about doing something hopefully that's focused on victory next year. But Brickmania will be a part of that again next year as well. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew, for taking us through the whole layout here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.